Welcome to the first ever episode of Nole'n with Nile. I'm Billy Beaman, host of Dynasty Underdog, and with me is Nile Lawrence-Stample, former national champion with the FSU Seminoles. What's going on, brother?
Nothing much, man. I'm happy to be here, man. I'm looking forward to this. This is super exciting, man. I love talking about the Knowles, and I'm looking forward to being able to push out some really good info and some really good substance for my Knowles, as well as just for my overall college football fans, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love that you're venturing out and doing this. For those that don't know me and Nile, we went to FSU together. We actually met at FSU. My wife is a longtime childhood friend of Nile's, and so we've spent a lot of time together. We've done actually vacation together at this point, so it's really cool. We go back ways, and we share a strong love for FSU. Obviously, mine is not nearly as strong as Nile's, which runs real deep because he is obviously a former player. And I mean, that's why we're here, right? So just before we get into our topic today, you want to say anything to the people about what we're doing here?
I've been really itching to get back to Florida State in some capacity. And my boys are now getting older, and they're really, really like passionate about Florida State and
Oh
the
yeah.
culture there and all the things that go with it. So I really want to be able to talk about some of the things that I went through there, as well as some of the updates that are happening currently, and some of the landscape that has changed and how they've changed. So I'm really looking forward to getting some information to you guys.
Love it, love it. Yeah, anybody who's been to Tallahassee, been to FSU knows it is hard to leave and you always want to come back, at
Yeah,
least for the games, at least for that kind of stuff. It's a
sure.
blast up there. So, with all that said, I'm not gonna beat around the bush too much longer. Let's get into our topic today because it's very interesting. And with our love for FSU, we're always honed in on college football a little bit here, a lot of it really. So let's get into our topic. We're talking about the NCAA, right? It's really either intentionally or unintentionally turned college football into a competitive fantasy land, just with all the lavish facilities, the relentless recruitment efforts to get these guys to come to their school. We have the NIL. It's just an entirely different landscape than what I think you experienced as a college athlete, back when we were there a decade or more ago at this point. So just starting from kind of the team level down, how do you think that the new landscape with the NIL money flying around and all that is impacting recruiting efforts?
I think they're impacting significantly, and I think so there's really something going on here with the NCAA. The NCAA, I don't know whether it was an intentionally or not, but I think the NCAA has created a true fantasy land for college football players. And the reason why I think that is because they've essentially told all of their organizations, we will not be paying these players. The players will not be able to receive any other compensation other than the stipend that was given from the NCAA or from their actual organization, which is really nominal. So you now have a opportunity to separate yourself from every other school. So now these organizations are building unbelievable facilities. Some of them are even nicer than NFL's. You have these massive, huge build outs of programs and these coaches and these nutritionists and all these people that are in these programs to make sure, hey, listen, come to our school. We have this program. We have that. We have that. And yes, they're important, but are they really the true things that are going to make these players great and bring the success to this team? I think a lot of it has to do with competing with the Joneses. How can I be better than How can I be better than Florida? How can I be better than these other organizations? To where now you have the NIL. On top of all the recruiting efforts and on top of all these really unbelievable things that these players are able to see at such a young age in order for them to come to this organization, now we can actually give you compensation. Right. So now I have compensation opportunities to go. And on top of that, the organization still has to do all the things that they were doing prior. So it's really started from the top down to where in the NFL, you're being given compensation. That is the meat and potatoes. That's why some of their facilities aren't the state of the art, because the players are coming here to make money. So now you have the college organization having to do all the frills and all the things and all that stuff in order to get players to come here, on top of giving them money, allowing them to have opportunities within their name, image, and likeness to make money. So it's just it's a really a win-win for these college football players. And I'm so happy for them genuinely because
Mhm.
it creates opportunity. I had so many injuries at Florida State. I had so many things happen. Financial compensation is important at that level. I truly do believe that. So it's just the NCAA has now made it a unbelievable opportunity to just play in college. Like if you're a
Yeah.
good player, a solid player, much less an amazing player, playing in college is unbelievable. So it's really interesting to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing kind of where that leads to in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's totally changed kind of the love for the game mentality and why you're playing, right? There's a I mean, there's a whole different mentality into why you want to go and play college football at this point. But just honing in on one of the things you said here, talking about kind of the lavish facilities and the staff upgrades, typically that's a good thing. So I guess like how is that negatively impacting the college football experience?
So I think what happens is so you have the NIL has now come in and become such a big prominent department and big prominent thing for college football that now, like I said, you have the colleges not necessarily spread thin, but they have so much going on in order to make sure that these players are being developed, as well as making sure that we're better than we have this going on over here, we have this going on over here. So as an organization, we have a lot of things going on. We have a lot of things. So now you're like, okay, well, now we have to bring NIL in and we have to take it seriously. Everyone has to take it seriously because
Okay.
it's really the new modern age of the game. So you have them come in and say, okay, well, now the NIL is real, it's happening. Where are we pulling these resources from in order to make sure the NIL department is built out efficiently, effectively, as well as with enough support to make sure that when deals and everything like that does happen, these players are taken care of. Like it's hard because everyone's learning at the same time, and these kids have one opportunity at this. They have one chance. They have a few years, 4 years, 5 years sometimes, in order to get it right. So you're asking a college team that you've been basically telling, yo, figure it out, but you have to do everything in your power to get this young man to come to your school, and now you need to facilitate the actual the payment of or the act of getting them NILs at the same time. So I think it's just it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it could really put a lot of strain on these kids, these players, and as well as the organization itself to get NIL right. While the last decade and since the beginning of time, they've been doing everything in their power to do everything other than that to get them to come.
So there's a couple of things here. We can say out front, like we want the college athletes to be paid, right?
Oh,
Like there's no, we like, it's just the way that this is going right now is definitely not the best way that they could be going about paying the athletes. So I think that's why we're discussing it and it's creating so many different problems. So I think we could just get that out of the way and we'll be talking more about maybe our thoughts on restructuring or whatever we think could happen. But we definitely want the athletes to be paid. That's for sure. Did you ever see anything like that going on when you were at FSU?
yeah. Oh, for sure. So the reason is unknown to me exactly what was the driving force on this particular situation. But when we were on when we were on our national championship run and we played Duke in the ACC championship, when we left that game, we got back to Tallahassee. It was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and our practice facility was getting bulldozed. It was getting completely torn down in order for them to build our new indoor facility, which was great. Awesome situation. We didn't have an indoor at that time. It's something that the team really needed to be able to have, but there was a lot of other things that the team really needed to have, to where a lot of my teammates and us were struggling financially, as well as a bunch of other things that were missing. But we knew that the indoor facility was made for one, us, but two, for recruitment. It's the aesthetics, it's the glam, it's the opportunity to be able to have something there that is basically plays on both sides. We can now practice indoors and not have weather stop us, but also have other teams come, other players and everything come and be like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Like you guys are really doing well. Look at this indoor facility. So it's a play on both sides. And I will say one thing about that situation is we came in at 3 o'clock in the morning. We drove into that stadium area and got dropped off, and it was completely flooded with fans and kids and everyone else. And it just, we knew we were going to the national championship, and the amount of support and everyone that was in that area at that time was just unbelievable. What a great way to end our regular season, our postseason, and then now be able to go into a national championship game prior, seeing everyone that's been supporting you, a majority of the people that have been supporting you during that time at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, unbelievable knows. I always have a love for that, obviously, because it takes time, it takes passion, it takes they watched that game and immediately left their house. Immediately, I'm going to meet them there. I love that. It was so cool to watch.
No, that mindset is it's insane. It's insanity, right? To get out of your house at 10, 11 o'clock and go meet the team. Like it's incredible. I was probably out there. So you can you can throw me in with the crowd of crazies for sure. Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I'm sure it's wondering kind of what's the driving force behind this, because we're doing so well. Do we need this, or are you, like you said, kind of trying to keep up with the Joneses, even though we're doing so well? So it kind of really just highlights how much these teams have to prioritize constantly upgrading or constantly adding something new to ensure that the next kid they're recruiting isn't going to look at, like you said, or whatever and be like, well, they have that, why don't you have that, right? So it's a challenge for sure. So how do you think like these kind of recruiting efforts that kids are experiencing these days would have impacted yourself or the Jameis Winstons of the world, just your teammates back then who totally went through, I think, a different recruiting cycle?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to tell what players would do back then now with that whole NIL situation and the compensation like that, because we're breeding basically two separate human beings, like, especially now that NIL has been around for the last few years, and it's somewhat settled and a lot of these high schoolers know what they're going into. We're breeding completely different college athletes, completely different college football players, as well as any other athletes that are out there that are getting NILs. It is a different situation. I think it's difficult to compare that because when we were playing, we knew that, yes, we may get a little bit of money here, a little whatever here, but like there was no compensation like the NFL. That wasn't even an option. It was win, get better, compete, and go to the NFL in order to actually get that money. So I think that was a lot easier on the team. It was a lot easier on the organization. It was a lot easier on the players. It was a lot easier because there was only one goal. Everyone was on the same goal. Everyone was on the same situation where some people are like, all right, listen, I'm going to stay in college as long as humanly possible because I'm making good money here. So I think it's hard to compare. It's hard to do that just because we're two different people. We really, really are.
I mean, it's really goes top down because the school's trying to balance the athletic excellence and keep the team really strong. But then there's the financial sustainability while the players are still trying to get paid. And, there's so much going on there. So I think, just as you were talking through it, I'm thinking, how are the player relationships and dynamics going to be impacted? Like a guy, just go with Caleb Williams, who's getting paid a ton of money, and maybe his running back isn't getting paid anything. Like, is there some resentment there?
Listen, in any shape or form, there's going to be resentment in the locker room. And players obviously hold it in. Some of them will talk about it, but I think there's a lot of camaraderie there that it kind of suppresses that. But I think regardless, there's going to be issues when you bring in money. When you bring in money, it comes hand in hand. So back to my other point was, if you have a opportunity to create an NIL department within your facility and you have the means to do that, but you have so many other things going on, you have to focus on making sure that that department is able to deal with those issues as well, that we're able to deal with them in sometimes a subtle fashion, sometimes an overall fashion. Like, how do you go about that compensation? How do you go about that to where these players aren't fighting, these players aren't feeling resentful? And I think that as the time is now and you're able to see that there's some like discrepancies with NIL, and like some players are getting it, some players are not. It's not really consistent. But once you get to a consistency and there's like certain like parameters that are set for these players to get this NIL, that's where I think you're going to start getting your issues. Because if some players aren't getting it, even though they're reaching that parameter, that's where it's like, okay, I know you might be a little bit better, but I'm still hitting my numbers. But why am I not getting the same compensation as you? Like that, where this is now a issue. This is now potentially sometimes even a legal issue. So where the worms can, when the worms stop to come out of this can, I have absolutely no clue. But there's going to be some issues in the locker room, unfortunately.
I don't see how there can't be when a guy, before a guy's better than you, right? That's going to happen. But now there's a dollar amount placed on it. That's got to hit you in the feels. That's got to hit you in the feels.
It's got to. It's especially
Yeah.
and you're talking about taking care of your family. You're talking about being able to like take care of yourself. Sometimes these players have kids. Like this is a very serious situation when you bring in the money aspect to it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And not just that. I mean, these kids have to deal with media, they have to deal with fans. And I do think that there's an aspect, like I'm a fan, right? But I'm not like this, but I know that there's plenty of fans out there who place too much importance on, the player, not the player themselves, but like how much the player means to them and their school and everything. And it's like they're going to have resentment towards certain players who are, taking a deal to go to a different school. They say they signed to FSU, but now they're going to go to LSU because they got a crazy NIL deal there, or they know that opportunity is there. That's going to, fans are going to go crazy over this kind of stuff. And not that athletes should necessarily care about that, but it is an aspect that is going to impact, an athlete mentally. It's going to be part of the landscape. So that's a piece of it. There's so much going on here. And you actually said something that I want to touch on right now, because obviously there's been talks about paying the players directly. You mentioned that, which no matter what is going to, like, we're going to continue getting that push for like the lavish lifestyle with I think money in college football anyway, with young kids. But you touched on kind of these kids wanting to stay in school longer now, right? Because they can get paid more. And from a historical standpoint, because I'm a fantasy guy, I know this nonsense, but from a historical standpoint, players who declare late, who stay 4 years or more, they tend to carry a lower percentage chance of succeeding at the next level. So NIL is incentivizing these kids to stay in school longer. Like, do you think that's going to have a downstream impact on that kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like, because there could just be better players who stay in school longer, and now there's like, it might not matter anymore is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, 1,000%. And that statistic is going to change because more than likely these players, that statistic is so high because a majority of the players that are actually really good leave early. So that's why that statistic is there. So if you have players that are like, okay, well, I'm not going into the league in 3 years, I'm going to go in 4 years, I'm going to go in 5 years, that statistic is going to completely change. And I think it's going to be it's going to be a revolution because you have players that are going to decide for themselves that I think that I can make more money now than in the NFL, which the NFL is going to have issues with that, right? The NFLs are going to have issues because you have teams that are going to say, okay, well, the stock is looking a little bit light this year. What are we doing here in terms of who I can pull, who I can draft? And it's going to be something that they're going to have to figure out because the NFL is definitely going to have some kickback on that and then some pushback on that because it's going to deal with the draft overall as well as some of these players. So obviously some drafts are better than others. If you are able to have players say, hey, I'm going to make enough money now in the next 2, in the next 3, in the next 4, in the next 5 years that I can now say, hey, I'm going to go into the NFL, but now I'm so financially stable at this point that going in, am I going to try? Am I going to push myself as hard as humanly possible? Because guess what? My mom has that house I was going to buy her. I have that finances that I was hoping to have. So are we going to see players come in late and fizzle early? That may be a possibility.
Oof. Yeah, that'd be brutal. I mean, you're going to see so many fewer love of the game kind of players, I feel like, who just like they want to do this because they love football or because they need football or
Yes.
whatever it is, because that, like you're saying, that's just not going to be as common anymore with or at least the opportunity to, to get away or to get out of these situations earlier, whatever it is, like it's going to be there earlier for them. So it's kind of really interesting where college football is going, what we're going to see from these players going forward. Real quick, I wanted to play this clip from Chip Kelly.
And they're saying, well, how do you do that? Well, Notre Dame's independent in football. and they're in a conference and everything else. I think we should all be independent in football. And you can have a 64 team conference that's in the Power Five, and you can have a 64 team conference in the Group of Five, and we separate it and we play each other. You can have the West Coast teams, and then every year we play 7 games against the West Coast teams, and then we play the East. So we play Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt, West Virginia, Virginia. Then the next year you play against the South while you still play your 7 teams. You can play a 7-game schedule. You can play 4 against another conference, another division opponent, and you can always play against one Mountain West team every year so that we can still keep those rivalries going. Not that I've really thought about this. Together collectively as a group, and so there's 132 teams, and we all share the same TV contract, so that the Mountain West doesn't have one, and the Sun Belt doesn't have another, and SEC has one, and they have another. That we all go together. That's a lot of games, and there's a lot of people in the TV world that would go through it. You can sponsor each one instead of calling it Group of Five and Power Five. You can call it Amazon, Nike, bid that out to things. You do a lot of different things. But I think if we still do the same thing and take all that money, and I would do this, and I think this needs to be done, that money now needs to be shared with the student athletes, and there needs to be revenue sharing. The players should get paid, and you get rid of NLI, and the schools should be paying the players because the players are what the product is. And the fact that they don't get paid is really the biggest travesty.
So what do you think? I mean, the most interesting part of that for us is kind of the revenue sharing piece of it, right? Like, I guess if you have any thoughts on the whole thing, go for it, man. But what do you think, I guess, about that portion of his idea about paying the players in a different way?
I think it's a cool point that he makes in terms of the revenue sharing of it, especially as you're breaking up these divisions into potentially sponsored companies. I think that was really, really interesting as well. I think when you have coaches like this talking about scenarios like this, I think you have a real problem in the NCAA. I truly do. I think it's something that shouldn't be happening, and it shows that there is a real problem that needs a solution. So I'm really not sure on what the solution should be. I think what he said was super interesting, but figuring out where players are on the hierarchy in the NCAA should be their only priority right now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they need to build a structure around this, right? Because it's the wild west out there right now. Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
it is literally the wild west. So there's no regulations. There's really no rules. And I think we're already kind of seeing some of the impacts of that. So this is a really interesting topic. We're probably going to end up talking about this more. So with that, is there any final remarks you want to leave the listeners with before we get out of here?
Let's continue to support college football in general. Let's continue to put our arms around these players on any opportunity possible, because they're really going through a lot right now. There's a lot of things going on that these players are unfortunately confused with. Some of them are taking advantage of some of those things, but I think overall we need to give the players a break, as well as some of these organizations that are really trying their best to figure this landscape out as we move forward. But yeah, man, continue to watch these videos, these podcasts, and we're going to be putting out as much valuable information in order for you guys to have a true insight of what's going on at college football at a different perspective.
Absolutely. And we're always going to be talking Florida State football here. So join us. We'll have different topics each time. You'll be able to catch us on YouTube. You'll be able to catch us on podcast forums. So definitely check us out and tune in next time.
Yep.
Peace out.
See you later.